So it being now doesn't mean anything. Literally means nothing. This is not them saying, oh, he did this because. This is them doing their job to fight the death penalty for something that technically hasn't even happened yet. If that makes sense. That part too. It explains a shit ton about his behavior. It explains a lot about his behavior. And again, the prime example that I can think of is the way that we're being told he reacted to the guy from the pool party. He only met him that one time. He sees him later on, like weeks and weeks and weeks later at a hiking trail, and he's overly excited to see him while the other guy is trying to figure out where the hell he even knows this guy from. But Bryan has that autistic brain, apparently, to where he just like grabs it and it's in there and he saw somebody, and because he intakes information differently than the rest of the people around him, it was a different reaction than normally people would have for seeing somebody that they just met once a few weeks prior. Because like if it was me and I went somewhere and met somebody for the first time and it was just like an in-passing thing, and then say I went to the grocery store a few weeks later and saw that person in passing again, it would probably just be like, hey, how you doing? And as we walked by each other in the aisle. You know what I mean? I'm good with faces. I'm not good with names. I'm horrible with names. Horrible with names. I just hope that more people start realizing that this has nothing to do with like the guilt phase. And I don't know why so many people are putting that out there, especially like there's some channels that I really do respect the way they think about things, but for this case, it makes a lot of people not very smart. I don't know why. I don't know why it is. I just wish it wasn't that way, because their brains are really great for lots of things. And if they would put it where it needed to be, then maybe we wouldn't be where we are right now. That's what I said. And I think that's, hey, Jackie, I think that was our main consensus about if she did see some sort of vacuum shaped something, that it was probably the golf clubs, because that's something that we can validate. Ethan's family themselves came out and told the entire world that Ethan's golf clubs and Ethan's vehicle and Hunter's vehicle were being kept in evidence. By who? By who? Not the state, not the feds. Bryan's people. Bryan's people. Oh, God. My friend's daughter just enrolled into the university in Moscow. They keep saying they caught the killer and he is guilty because he's weird. Are you freaking for real? Wow. That's pretty gross, honestly. That's wild as shit. That's wild. I just say what comes to mind, even though it might sound stupid. I don't care. Like earlier, I was talking to my friend and I was like, isn't Boise like the capital of Idaho? I don't know. I might have just sounded like really stupid, but I don't care. And it's like kept on talking, because unless it's my state, I just don't really care. Which is kind of stupid, but still the same way. Thank you for the $5, Connie. There's people on Twitter that hate me. There's people on Twitter that hate me. Oh, it's hilarious. I'm like, all you have to do is read the documents. Right here. Exactly. All I have to do is read the documents. I wouldn't have anybody to argue with on Twitter if people actually read the full document. People are out here like getting mad about things that aren't even real. And I'm just like, what's wrong with y'all? Like, what's wrong with y'all? I got in so many arguments this morning on Twitter. I downloaded it and got in the bathtub and just it was fun. So ridiculous. Well, good night, Jane. We're gonna actually start reading this document though, I promise. We're gonna actually start reading this, because I want to know what it says. I want to know if they have anything in here when it comes to when was he diagnosed? What's going on? This is going to be a lot of case fact. So y'all get ready. Did you? People over there are cray-cray, bro. Cray-cray. Get some sleep. I hope you feel better. Looks like you and Conspiracy are both sick. I'll talk all the shit. I'll talk enough shit for both of us. I think he's got a crush, bro. I don't think they got a crush. He can retweet me all he wants. He's just mad because he doesn't read documents. The mask guy is absolutely unhinged. He's literally going off about stuff that's not even real. There's another guy that went off and said that I said something about a bag of trash out of Bryan Kohberger's trunk of his car. And I'm like, when the frick did I ever say that? And he's like adamantly pissed and going off and arguing with my friend on Twitter while my friend's defending me. And he's like, you're on crack, dude. Like, what's wrong with you? And he's like, she said something about a bag of trash in the trunk of Bryan's car. I'm like, freaking where? When the frick did I ever say that? I never once said anything about a bag of trash coming out of the trunk of Bryan Kohberger's car. Dude is freaking hallucinating worse than Dylan was. Absolutely wild. I mean, more points towards their crazy shit than Bryan's. Yeah. Like, one guy told me that I was a meth head because I was attacking the kids. I was like, dude, I'm too fat to do meth. You couldn't come up with something better than that? Come on. Like, I don't even care. Ugh, he's dumb. But see, that's also why I don't have Twitter on my phone, because Twitter's freaking brain rot. I literally only downloaded it this morning because my friend texted me and he was like, this dude's talking shit. I'm like, oh, watch me download this now then. Just so stupid. People are dumb. Humans are stupid. Like, in a mass, we're absolutely ignorant creatures. There's crap tons of evidence, but exactly, it all points away from him. Points away. No, they're going to be there on the 9th. I hope they actually let you guys in there. I mean, I highly doubt it. I don't think they've let anybody in at all since they switched. But that'll be cool that you guys are going to be there. Y'all can see the chaos. Okay. Geez, I've been talking for an hour. But that's fine because I like talking to you guys. All right, let's get started with this document. Okay, this is the motion to strike the death penalty for the autism spectrum disorder. And also remember, there is no insanity plea in Idaho. So they technically don't care about any of this stuff anyway, but they still try to use it for like if somebody has autism or any sort of disorder on that sort of like spectrum of what autism is, then you technically cannot give them capital punishment regardless. That's how it's been explained to me. Comes now. Bryan C. Kohberger, by and through his attorneys of record, and hereby moves this court to strike the death penalty as a sentencing option in his case because Mr. Kohberger's autism spectrum disorder reduces his culpability, negates the retributive and deterrent purposes of capital punishment, and exposes him to the unacceptable risk that he will be wrongfully convicted and sentenced to death. Right there. This is the reason why all this shit shouldn't even have to be filed until after, if it's needed. Because all this can be being filed, and they absolutely do not prove their case. And then it's for what? All his freaking businesses out here for nothing. For absolutely freaking nothing. But I mean, look, if he really truly ends up being innocent the way that most of us think, the more crap that they end up having to expose about him, the bigger the lawsuit. So let's just keep that in mind. In making this motion, Mr. Kohberger relies on his right to be free from cruel and unusual punishment, his right to due process, his right to a fair trial, his right to counsel, his right to present a defense, his right to a reliable sentencing determination, and other rights safeguarded by the 5th, 6th, 8th, and 14th Amendments to the United States Constitution, Articles 1, Section 1, 2, 6, 7, and 13 of the Idaho State Constitution. Mr. Kohberger is aware of the deadline previously imposed by the court scheduling order, but has good cause for filing this motion at this time. Good cause is laid out in an affidavit attached but filed under seal. I wish we could freaking read that. A notarized and signed copy will be provided once received from Dr. Reynolds. And that's actually, I believe that's actually already filed. I saw something about a notarized something or other. I just want to show, yeah, right here. This is the motion to seal that notarized affidavit. So yeah, they already do have it on file. Okay. This is a table of contents. I'm not going to read all this because it's going to be above every section that we start reading anyway. Okay. Introduction. The United States Supreme Court has repeatedly emphasized the exceptional and irrevocable nature of the death penalty. Now, before we get started, I will say what I've already said. Whoever did this does not deserve to breathe. Whoever actually did this deserves all the things that Bryan Kohberger's team are trying to take off the table. Whoever did this deserves what they get. They just have to be proven. So I am somebody who supports the DP, as flawed as it is, because I don't see a world where somebody who does horrible things to children gets to keep on breathing. I don't see a world where somebody who can go and do horrible things to multiple people and have their violence escalate into even more horrible things as time goes by because of all the constant slaps on the wrist that keep on happening for no freaking reason with these disgusting things. No. It has to be valid and proven beyond a reasonable doubt and then some. But I am a firm believer that some people just don't deserve to keep breathing once they do certain things. And that's never going to change. Death in its finality differs more from life imprisonment than a 100-year prison term differs from one of only a year or two. Because of the qualitative difference, there is a corresponding difference in the need for reliability in the determination that death is the appropriate punishment in a specific case. Exactly. It has to be perfectly proven. Perfectly proven. Woodson versus North Carolina from 1976 is what they're citing. This heightened standard of reliability is a natural consequence to the knowledge that execution is the most irremediable and unfathomable of penalties, that death is different. Given that the imposition of death by public authority is so profoundly different from all other penalties, we cannot avoid the conclusion that an individualized decision is essential in capital cases. Because death is different, when the state announces its intention to seek the death penalty in a case, it imposes an extraordinary burden upon the court, the state, and defense counsel to ensure the fairness, accuracy, and reliability of the trial and any subsequent sentencing proceeding. When a defendant's life is at stake, a court must be particularly sensitive to ensure that every safeguard is observed. And they cite Gregg versus Georgia from 1976 again, and must take extraordinary measures to guarantee that a death sentence is not imposed out of whim, passion, prejudice, or mistake. Eddings versus Oklahoma from 1982. Okay. These extraordinary measures must apply at both the merits phase and the sentencing phase of a capital trial. In addition to imposing a heightened standard of reliability in cases where the state is seeking death, the United States Supreme Court has firmly held that capital punishment is only constitutional under the Eighth Amendment if it is reserved for those few offenders deemed extraordinarily culpable and therefore uniquely deserving of execution. And there are plenty. Let's be so for real. There are plenty. While every murder is appalling, only the most extreme qualify for the death penalty. Adkins versus Virginia from 2002. The average murderer is insufficiently culpable to justify the most extreme sanction available to the state. A case may only be appropriately capital when it falls into a very narrow category of the most serious crimes and also involves a defendant whose extreme culpability makes them the most deserving of execution. In layman's terms, amongst the entire class of murderers, the death penalty must be reserved for the worst of the worst. I agree. Holding true to these constitutional principles of reliability and proportionality, the court has categorically prohibited the imposition of the death penalty where a particular characteristic of the defendant renders him less culpable, negates the retributive and deterrent aims of capital punishment, or creates a risk of an erroneous death sentence. Prohibiting the execution of the intellectually disabled is something that was mentioned in Atkins. And then they're talking about Roper again. Prohibiting the execution of juvenile offenders, which they shouldn't even be mentioning something that has anything to do with the juvenile because we're not talking about children in any of this. This reasoning applies with equal force to defendants who, like Mr. Kohberger, have autism spectrum disorder, or ASD. ASD is a neurological and developmental disorder that affects how people interact with others, communicate, learn, and behave. And they are talking about, there's a link right here. Well, let me just, okay. I don't want to click on it. I want to give it to y'all. This is The link for the autism spectrum disorder information that they posted from the NIH. And this was apparently just, wow. Last visited February 10th, 2025. Okay, well, I'm going to click on it now. So does that mean, wow, their link actually works. Check that out. That like never freaking happens. So I guess that means they got the most like updated information just to like make sure that it was valid. I guess. People with ASD, including Mr. Kohberger, exhibit deficits in nearly all of the same areas cited by the court, and in concluding that it is unconstitutional for people with intellectual disabilities to be sentenced to death because such sentences are not proportional and cannot be reliably imposed. Indeed, the pervasive media coverage emphasizing symptoms of Mr. Kohberger's disability demonstrates that the very risks recognized by the court are already being realized to his prejudice. Accordingly, this court must strike death as a sentencing option in this case. Again, whoever did this, in my opinion, deserves the DP. We shouldn't even be talking about it until after we get a conviction. I'm never going to change my mind on that. Even if he ends up being the guy by some miraculous ninja magic, I still feel like this stuff shouldn't be talked about until we get a conviction. The death penalty is only appropriately sought in a case where it falls into a very narrow category of the most serious crimes and involves a defendant whose extreme culpability makes them the most deserving of execution. The Eighth Amendment limits the death penalty to those offenders with a consciousness materially more depraved than that of the typical murderer, which is so wild. There's a typical red rummer. How wild. The death penalty must be limited to those offenders whose extreme culpability makes them the most deserving of execution. In prohibiting execution of people with intellectual disabilities, the U.S. Supreme Court identified several characteristics that make such defendants categorically less culpable than the average criminal. Because of their impairments, however, by definition, they have diminished capacities to understand and process information, to communicate, to abstract from mistakes and learn from experience, to engage in logical reasoning, to control impulses, and to understand the reactions of others. People with ASD exhibit impairment in nearly all of those areas. There are two primary diagnostic criteria for ASD. First, a person must display persistent deficits in social communication and interaction across multiple contexts, as manifested by deficits in all three of the following areas. Am I about to get the freaking hiccups? Is it raining? I shut up long enough to hear that it's actually raining outside. Okay. Anyway, 1, social emotional reciprocity. 2, nonverbal communicative behaviors used for social interaction. And 3, developing, maintaining, and understanding relationships. And this comes from the U.S. Center of Disease Control and Prevention website. And I guess right here. Just let me just highlight it. Okay. Here, I'll throw y'all this one too. And I'll also give y'all this right here. I'll throw the link for the document down in here in case y'all want to open it and read along yourselves. There's the doc. Okay. Second, a person must display restrictive, repetitive patterns of behavior, interests, or activities as manifested by at least 2 of the following: stereotypes or repetitive motor movements, use of objects or speech, insistence on sameness, inflexible adherence to routines or ritualized patterns of verbal or nonverbal behavior, highly restricted, fixated interests that are abnormal in intensity or focus, and 4, hyper or hypo-reactivity to sensory input or unusual interests in sensory aspects of the environment. As a result of these deficits, offenders with autism spectrum disorder tend to lack theory of mind, especially empathy and the ability to see from other perspectives, the ability to appreciate the whole context, executive functioning required for planning and organization, appreciation for the consequences of one's actions, and the ability to generalize learning from one situation to another. And I guess this is a book from somebody named Astrid Bergden, and it came out in 2016. A comprehensive neuropsychological evaluation of Mr. Kohberger, conducted by Dr. Rachel Orr, she's got lots of things behind her name, found that Mr. Kohberger continues to exhibit all the core diagnostic features of ASD currently, with significant impact on his daily life. I want to know when he was officially diagnosed. Like when? When? Social deficits, including a diminished ability to understand the reactions of others, are perhaps the most widely recognized characteristics of ASD. People with ASD often have difficulty identifying the emotional or mental states of others and how to respond appropriately. And then it mentions a book by Colleen Berriesa. And then another one by Jared Brown. And another one written by the Jared Brown guy, and looks like it's co-authored by this Weinkauf person. Accordingly, it is difficult for people with ASD to interpret and respond to social cues, particularly when those cues are nonverbal. Berriesa from 2021. As it relates to this case, Dr. Orr confirmed that Mr. Kohberger has displayed lifelong deficits in social emotional reciprocity, including limited perspective taking and limited sharing of affect emotions of others. Now remember, in the Tapatalk stuff, if it's his account, this goes into what he could have possibly actually been feeling as a teenager, because there's one specific one that's always been like the big talk. And I believe it's like he just felt like a hunk of meat. Like when his parents or his dad would hug him, or he would hug his family, he never really felt anything. That's not abnormal. That's really not abnormal, especially not for a teenager. And especially not for a teenager dealing with something like Asperger's or some sort of autism, and maybe also dealing with something else, because we do have to remember that he was overweight and then jumped into a drug that you don't just jump into. Like, it's definitely, H is not your first thing of choice, okay? Not normally. You don't instantly jump to a needle whenever you are a child. I've always thought that that was something serious. But again, doesn't necessarily mean crap when it comes to this situation, because he's not Stretch Armstrong and he went the opposite direction that night. So it doesn't really matter, honestly, like at all, how he felt or what his autism could do. If he wasn't there, it doesn't matter. If he wasn't the one who did it, it doesn't matter. Along with difficulty recognizing the emotions of others, people with ASD often struggle to recognize and regulate their own emotions. This can manifest as diminished capacity to control impulses. Dr. Orr observed Mr. Kohberger's impulsive tendencies throughout her evaluation, which were also reported by his family. So he must do something. He must have some sort of like tic or some sort of motion or something that he does that she can tell, even in an abnormal environment like a jail room that you're meeting your psych doctor in while you're locked up. That's noticeable. It has the exhibit information. Additionally, a need to engage in repetitive behaviors or interest is one of the diagnostic domains. I knew they were going to screw up eventually. They always end up doing that. A need to engage in repetitive behaviors or interest is one of the diagnostic domains of ASD. CDC, supra. I don't know what that means. CDC, like the Center for Disease Control. I guess that's where they got that from. For many people with ASD, this manifests in compulsive behavior that cannot easily be controlled by rational thinking. Since childhood, Mr. Kohberger has exhibited compulsions around hand washing and other cleaning behaviors, which we heard from neighbors. He vacuums in the middle of the night. Whenever my kids were really, really little and we lived in an apartment, I was working a regular job during the day. I wasn't doing YouTube. I would get up in the morning, take the kids to school, go to work, get off work, pick up the kids from daycare, do the grocery shopping. I would come home. There's a reason why I just said all that and my brain just went completely blank because I started reading something. Did you just hear my child? Can y'all hear him? I want to be quiet for a second. Tell me if you can hear my son's cackling. He just went quiet. Oh, can you hear him now? Oh, yeah. I would be up late as shit because I would be doing so much stuff during the day. Just being a regular person who is also in school. Oh, you can't hear him cackling? Okay. That was also in college because when I was doing all this, I was also taking online courses. I was vacuuming my house in the middle of the freaking night after my kids went to sleep. I'm sure that I woke up my neighbors upstairs several times vacuuming and cleaning the house at 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. You can hear his cackling. He sounds like a witch sometimes. He gets crazy. So this whole thing about him like being up vacuuming, that doesn't bother me. I used to do that because it's the only time that I had. And if he's a PhD student who's also going to school while also doing work, like he's having to turn in papers while also grading other people's papers, he probably only had time to clean his apartment in the middle of the night. So I don't find that a big deal either. So what if the guy likes to wash his hands? That also alludes to he's going to wear gloves in a grocery store because people are nasty and touch things and don't wash their hands. So it's not like it's a bad habit to be in, to be somebody who washes their freaking hands all the time. It's really not. Diminished ability to communicate is another a hallmark of ASD. This word shouldn't be there. Is another hallmark of ASD. Language deficits are common among people with ASD, ranging from a complete lack of verbal language skills to difficulty recognizing and understanding abstract language, sarcasm, and irony. People with ASD universally struggle with pragmatics or the appropriate use of language for the situation at hand. Think Sheldon Cooper from Big Bang. I mean, honestly, it's kind of pointless to clean before the end of the day because everybody's going to be messing up that house. So there's really like no point. But I think of Sheldon Cooper from Big Bang Theory. And if you've never watched that show and you have no idea what I'm talking about, watch one episode. Just go and watch any episode. And you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. He doesn't understand sarcasm. He has no idea whenever somebody's being serious, whenever they're joking. He's extremely smart and he needs everything to be the same. He has to sit on the one spot of the couch. Anybody else sits on that spot of the couch, his entire day is ruined. They can't have Chinese food on pizza night because it throws off his entire year. It's like that. It's like that. I always think of Sheldon Cooper. These language deficits can become even more pronounced in stressful and anxiety-inducing situations. Although Mr. Kohberger has strong verbal abilities, he failed to recognize multiple idioms during Dr. Orr's evaluation. Dr. Orr noted that his language was often over-inclusive, disorganized, highly repetitive, and overly formal. So what? Oh, hold on. I got to go make him shut his door. Hold I don't even know the game he's playing. Terraria? It's like some weird 2D flat game that suddenly all these kids are into. I'm like, this looks like a Sega game. What are you doing? I made him shut his door. He's too much. Okay. So what this is saying is that even though Bryan Kohberger is obviously very, very smart, he has a PhD. He was highly recommended by his previous professors for this PhD position. He doesn't understand social cues. He doesn't understand whenever somebody's being sarcastic. And in this stressful situation of possibly being executed for something that he didn't do, his language is failing him. It's disorganized, over-inclusive, highly repetitive, and overly formal. Probably explains a lot about his recent weight loss because he looked like, is it gaunt? Is that the word that you would use for somebody whose cheeks look sunken in? Because that's what he looked bad. Like people with intellectual disabilities, people with autism also have diminished capacities to understand and process information and to abstract from mistakes and learn from experience. Studies show that ASD is characterized by deficits in complex cognitive processing. And they are talking about something written by a Diane Williams. Here's another link. Is it going to let me just take it? Why does it do this to me? I don't know why I can't just take the link. So here's another link to NIH. In particular, people with ASD are generally able to identify concepts and learn established rules, but struggle with concept formation or the ability to develop new concepts based upon experience. In other words, people with ASD may be able to comprehend information, but like people with intellectual disabilities, they have difficulty extrapolating. Wow, that's a word. I've never seen this word before. Sorry, not sorry. I'm going to look it up. Extrapolating is a formal term that means to form an opinion or to make an estimate about something from known facts. Oh, you mean like what we do every single day on this channel? Should I change the channel name? Like that literally is what we do all day long. They have difficulty extrapolating that information and applying it to a new domain. These deficits in conceptual reasoning and problem solving are apparent even among people with ASD who have average or above average general intelligence. Indeed, despite his high baseline intelligence, Mr. Kohberger exhibits slow verbal processing and weaknesses in certain areas of executive functioning, including cognitive flexibility and organizational approach. So does that mean that he's incapable of planning? Does that mean that he's incapable of planning? That almost is like what it sounds like. Dr. Orr observed that Mr. Kohberger tended to perceive information in a more piecemeal manner. I don't know what that means. People pronounce it extrapolating. I've heard that word, but this other one, I don't know. I've never seen that word before. That makes, okay, extrapolating makes sense. That makes sense. That makes sense. Extrapolate. The way that it's written, it looks like extrapolating. I'm not afraid to say that I don't know a freaking word, bro. I don't know. Same word. Okay, well, I know extrapolating. I know that word. I just didn't. That's weird. Okay. I'm not afraid to say, I don't know. I gotta look it up. I don't really care how that makes me look. I'm not dishonest about it. As a result of these impairments, people with ASD show diminished adaptive functioning, much like people with intellectual disabilities. Adaptive functioning encompasses those skills essential for real-world, everyday functioning that generally fall within the broad areas of daily living skills, socialization, and communication. And then they talk about something written by a Goldie McQuaid. And we've got another linky link. I don't know if y'all are using these, but I'm still going to put them in here. Piecemeal means bits and pieces. The continuity of thoughts and coherence is impaired. Interesting. Jeff will always be a guilter. Even if they actually do prove that somebody in the fraternity did something, I think Jeff will always believe that Bryan did it. That's just who I think Jeff is. But then again, that's just me. He's still welcome. He's fine. Just don't be mean to each other. Notably, people with ASD exhibit adaptive functioning that falls far below what would be expected given their cognitive ability. In its post-Atkins jurisprudence, the court has repeatedly emphasized that adaptive functioning is a key consideration in determining whether a person is intellectually disabled and thus excluded from execution. In Hall versus Florida from 2014, courts must permit defendants to present evidence of adaptive functioning to demonstrate intellectual disability where IQ scores fall within margin of error. And then Moore versus Texas from 2017, same, and directing courts to focus adaptive functioning inquiry on adaptive deficits rather than strengths. It follows that people with ASD who are similarly impaired in this area should not be sentenced to death. Let's go on to the second part. Sunday evening? It's not even Sunday period here yet. That's wild. All these time zones are so crazy to me. The deterrence and retributive aims of the death penalty are not met by executing people with ASD. In order for a death sentence to meet the Eighth Amendment's proportionality requirement, it must satisfy the two penological goals of capital punishment. Gregg versus Georgia, this court identified retribution and deterrence of capital crimes by prospective offenders as the social purposes served by the death penalty. Unless the imposition of the death penalty on a blank person measurably contributes to one or both of these goals, it is nothing more than the purposeless and needless imposition of pain and suffering, and hence an unconstitutional punishment. I disagree. Because, like I said, certain people don't deserve to live once they've been proven to have done certain horrible things. And as far as I understand, if it goes right with the way that the injections work, if it goes right, they don't feel any pain. It's literally created so that they don't feel any pain. Like, it's literally supposed to be that sort of like peaceful, go in your sleep type situation, from how it's supposed to be anyway. They've obviously had a lot of issues, which is honestly unacceptable and makes no sense, because we're in 2025. Like, we're catching rockets out the sky. We can't fix whatever the problem is with the chemicals that they use for this. That doesn't make sense. We should be past the science on that. And that's just dumb that we are not there yet. The death penalty is excessive when it is grossly out of proportion to the crime, or it does not fulfill the two distinct social purposes served by the death penalty: retribution and deterrence of capital crimes. And they mentioned Coker versus Georgia from 1977. Plurality opinion. A punishment might fail the test on either ground. The Atkins court concluded that neither aim was met by executing intellectually disabled defendants. Discussing retribution, the court reasoned, if the culpability of the average murderer is insufficient to justify the most extreme sanction available to the state, the lesser culpability of the mentally, I'm not saying that word, offender surely does not merit that form of retribution. Thus, pursuant to our narrowing jurisprudence, which seeks to ensure that only the most deserving of execution are put to death, in exclusion for the mentally is appropriate. As discussed in part 1, the court's conclusions regarding the diminished culpability of people with intellectual disabilities are equally applicable to people with ASD. Accordingly, if the retributive aim of the death penalty is not satisfied by executing people with intellectual disabilities, it is not met by executing people with ASD. Turning to deterrence, the Atkins court again relied on deficits that are shared by people with intellectual disabilities and people with ASD. The theory of deterrence in capital sentencing is predicated upon the notion that the increased severity of the punishment will inhibit criminal actors from carrying out murderous conduct. Yet it is the same cognitive and behavioral impairments that make these defendants less morally culpable. For example, the diminished ability to understand and process information, to learn from experience, to engage in logical reasoning, or to control impulses, that also make it less likely that they can process the information of the possibility of execution as a penalty, and as a result, control their conduct based upon that information. Okay, well, even people with the most severe cognitive disabilities that still have like functioning lives, okay? Like, we see them a lot on, like, let's say reality TV, and there's like certain TikToks of people with certain mental disorders that have open restaurants, open businesses. Their families have their own businesses where they give a lot of accommodations for certain people so that they can actually fulfill like packing orders or doing things like that when it comes to real life, okay? Even people with those sorts of disorders know you're not supposed to hurt other people. That's actually kind of like the way that they all sort of like live their life. They all pretty much know that you don't do harm. Like, it's literally like ingrained in people with certain mental disabilities. They're like the happiest, gentlest, go-lucky people that you normally meet. And there's several different mental disorders that make people behave that way. They're happy, they're stress-free, they have like all the problems in the world because of their, their mental issues, or their medical issues rather, where they have to take medications, go to the doctors, do all these things. But you can't tell. You can't tell, okay? Even those people know it's not okay to harm people. So while I understand their argument, I don't always agree with everything that the defense says. Just like I said, if he somehow ends up being magically out of nowhere the dude, I don't care about his autism. Boy was taking criminal justice classes, and he damn well knew what was going to happen. But that goes with everyone. Everyone knows if you do something bad, the cops are going to come and get you. Everyone knows if you do something to a certain extreme, you're going to spend the rest of your existence here on Earth as a freaking human behind in a cage. That doesn't stop people from doing it. Just like criminals don't care about laws, criminals honestly don't give a shit about the death penalty. Most of them are so conceited and egotistical, they don't think they're ever going to get caught anyway. So they don't care. They honestly just do not care. The characteristics of ASD make deterrence even less salient as an aim of punishment. The repetitive behaviors and fixations that are key diagnostic criteria for ASD mean that for many defendants with ASD, their offending behavior is compulsive and cannot be curbed by a rational cost-benefit analysis. Additionally, because people with ASD have difficulty with abstract thinking and my brain just went blank again. Extrapolating. I know that word. Extrapolating from one scenario to another, they may not easily connect their present actions to a potential future outcome. And again, in this situation, I don't think it would matter because he was in criminal justice. So they really can't say that for this particular case. So even if he does get convicted, they still can't use this, honestly, to try to get rid of the death penalty because of his profession. So there's that. It's kind of like a pointless argument, honestly. Execute all the way around. Because again, it shouldn't be coming out now. He hasn't been convicted. If he doesn't get convicted, then all his business is out here anyway, which it could cause problems for him later on in life besides what's happening now. Then if he is convicted, I don't give a damn about none of this because, boy, you knew what you were doing and you knew you were going to get in trouble for it. So let's just stop playing. Executing people with ASD does not meaningfully satisfy the penological aims of retribution or deterrence. Accordingly, sentencing people with ASD to death violates the 8th Amendment. Number 3, as awareness of ASD becomes more widespread, evolving standards of decency condemn execution of people with ASD. The 8th Amendment prohibits excessive punishments. Whether a punishment is excessive must be judged by current prevailing standards of decency. The 8th Amendment must draw its meaning from the evolving standards of decency that mark the progress of a maturing society. Humans ain't it. Sorry to tell you. Humans are not maturing whatsoever. If anything, we're devolving. Let's be so for real. See, that means it's true because I'm choking on the truth. Hold on. The 8th Amendment's applicability must change as the basic mores of society change. Quoting Furman versus Georgia from 1972. In affirming its holding that people with intellectual disabilities cannot be sentenced to death, the court observed, the 8th Amendment is not fastened to the obsolete, but may acquire meaning as public opinion becomes enlightened by a humane justice. To enforce the Constitution's protection of human dignity, this court looks to the evolving standards of decency that mark the progress of a maturing society. The 8th Amendment's protection of dignity reflects the nation we have been, the nation we are, and the nation we aspire to be. This is to affirm that the nation's constant, unyielding purpose must be to transmit the Constitution so that its precepts and guarantees retain their meaning and force. Let me ask y'all a question for a second. And I want people that are for and against the death penalty to answer this question. So I'm going to stop for a second. How do y'all feel about the states that have allowed people that do things to children to be castrated? Are there any of you that are against the death penalty, but that are okay with mutilation, is what I'm asking. I'm okay with both. But I'm curious as to how many people, I was choking on the truth. I want to know how many people that are against the death penalty are okay with mutilation. I mean, I feel like it should have always been that way. I'm fine with it too. I'm okay with both. I don't know. I mean, whichever one, honestly, because they both do the same thing. I don't know. I know there's a few states that have passed the castration situation. I mean, it has to be proven for real. But I really do feel like a lot of people are like completely okay with castration, but will like throw a fit if somebody who does the exact same thing that they got castrated for ends up getting the death penalty. As long as it's not me, I think it's fine. Okay, Ulcer, I hope it's never you. I mean, wood chipper. Wood chipper. Okay with both, yeah. Yeah, I mean, honestly, if I don't give a crap what you do. Like, if you do something to a kid, or I mean, honestly, and this is gonna sound however the frick it sounds, but somebody that can be evil to animals deserves to just not breathe. Because if you can do something to something so innocent that can't defend itself, then why are you even here? What is your freaking purpose of living if that's the kind of human you were born to be? There's just some people that should not breathe. Bat-shetty castration? I don't think you can live after bat-shetty castration. Honestly. Bro. How many of y'all watched Don't F with Cats? Put a 1 in the chat. Y'all remember that shit? That was a wild ride. That was a wild ride. That was a crazy one. They went ham for the cat guy. And that dude was sadistic. Never heard of it? Get a bottle of wine and take a few hours. Find it online and watch the whole thing. It's basically about people just like us that these random videos, I'll give like a 2-minute rundown. These random videos of this guy doing these horrible things to kittens. That guy, Luca Magnotta, all right? He did these horrible things to kittens in a video without showing his face. Like, you can see his hands. I think one had to do with water and the other one had to do with the snake. There was multiple videos. People like us who are out here talking about these cases, going online, doing stuff on Google Maps, trying to figure shit out, banded together and found pieces that were in the back of this guy's room decor and different little things about like where this guy was like shooting films, all these things. They were able to go on like Google Maps and find like where the location was. They found the IP addresses that things were being loaded from. They found this dude who was torturing cats and ended up finding out he was doing it to people too. He ended up doing something to some people. And these armchair detectives solved this damn thing. They found the guy. They turned him in. He did everything right. They did everything right and found this guy and turned him in. And it's called Don't F with Cats. So people that can sit here and act like people that are out here talking about these cases don't do anything, there's plenty of times that armchair sleuths have done plenty of things. He went from cats to humans and was found out by people like us, who most of them didn't even live in Canada. This stuff happened in Canada. They were literally all across the world. And they solved it by literally just being on the computer and using the resources on the devil box. Wow. Most do start with animals. That's why it's extremely interesting that we had Buddy the dog happen. And I know I need to file a FOIA for that. I keep on forgetting, but it's on the list. I need to do it. I still have to catch up on Gabby Petito. I still have to. Oh, Jeff's a welcome opposing opinion. He's been around for a while. He keeps it a lot more civil than he used to. Yeah, it was pretty bad. It was pretty bad. Covert narcissists are very fun and charming. Sad truth in real life, too. Interesting. Hell must have froze. Okay, let's get back to the document. Okay. The past 4 decades have seen a significant evolution in the understanding of ASD. Another infantile autism Although infantile autism was first described by psychiatrist Leo Kanner in 1943, it was not included in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual as one of the several pervasive developmental disorders until 1980. And it talks about something written by Nicole Rosen. When the DSM was revised 7 years later, published as DSM-IIIR, the condition was renamed from infantile autism to autism disorder to encompass all ages and developmental levels. The DSM-IIIR established new diagnostic criteria for autism disorder based on 3 domains of impairment. 1, qualitative impairment in reciprocal social interaction. 2, qualitative impairment in communication. And 3, restricted interest in activities and repetitive movements. The 4th edition of the DSM, published in 1994, recognized Asperger's syndrome and autistic disorder as separate diagnoses within the broad category of pervasive developmental disorders. See, I didn't even know that. I thought that Asperger's was literally just like on the very low level spectrum of autism. I didn't actually know that it was considered something separate. I had no idea. Jennifer gifted 10 memberships. Well, thank you very much. And congratulations to the guys that got those memberships. Don't forget that there is a link in the members only community post where I have a link to a Google Drive share folder where I put stuff in there sometimes. The latest one was the text messages where I've gone in and highlighted times, whatnot, stuff like that. It doesn't have too much in it. I just started it, but there's going to be a whole lot more put in there as we go. Someone just said it's not separate anymore. It's not separate anymore. So it used to be, but it's not anymore. Oh yeah, no, it's like a spectrum in itself, right? Like Asperger's is technically like a spectrum in itself. Like I think I mentioned this before. When I lived in Louisville with my mom, like, I don't even know. Ariel is 18 now, and she was like, I had just left their father. We hadn't even started our divorce yet. She had to have been like 3 because they're only 23 months apart. I don't even think Slade was a whole year old yet. Anyway, I did karaoke a lot whenever I had left my ex-husband. And I karaoke'd a lot with this ex-Army vet. And he had gone and fought in Afghanistan. He was going to college. He worked in like a high-techy type job. He had Asperger's. And he did all kinds of stuff. I mean, honestly, unless you knew he had Asperger's, you just thought that he was a little bit quirky, a little hyper. Oh, I can sing, bro. You just don't know. I can sing. I actually have recordings of me that my friend used to take whenever I used to do karaoke like a super lot when my kids were younger. And one day she was sitting down editing a video of mine that a video she took of me singing, and they actually thought that it was Amy Lee from Evanescence because I used to sound just like her. But then I got really, really sick and my vocal cords got scarred up. So now I do a lot of like male rock, like Shinedown. That's a lot of what I do is Shinedown. I just don't have a life, so I don't sing anymore. I do karaoke in my bedroom. I mean, I just feel like so many people say they have autism now that I'm almost kind of wondering. Oh, I deleted that one, Mads. Well, I didn't delete it. I took it off of this channel because I want to put it on my personal channel. Because I don't want that on this channel. Because it is me singing. It's me singing a Rihanna song. And thank you for saying that I'm good. I'm going to post it on my other channel eventually here. Oh, you used to do therapy for people with autism. That's awesome. That's awesome. But thank you. I'll repost it on the other channel eventually. Okay. The current version of the DSM, published in 2013 as DSM-5, reflects a major shift in the understanding of autism. DSM-5 established a comprehensive diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder, which replaces Asperger's syndrome and autistic disorder. The current ASD diagnosis recognizes autism as a spectrum of conditions. Also consolidated the diagnostic criteria of impairments in social interactions and communication into a single domain, removed language impairment as a specific diagnostic criterion, and added unusual sensory sensitivity as a manifestation of the restrictive repetitive behavior domain. As the psychological community's understanding of ASD has evolved, so has awareness of the condition. ASD is now the fastest growing developmental disability in the United States. But isn't that an issue? Like, does anybody, let me stop for a second. Does anybody not find that to be a problem? Because, like, okay, back whenever I was a really uneducated single mom who thought that the government and the schools and the people that were supposed to help you take care of your kids actually had your kids' best interest at heart, I was literally making my damn little bitty kids who were just hyper because they're little bitty ass kids take a whole bunch of freaking ADHD pills whenever they didn't need it because the school freaking told me that I had to. Okay? Very much shit that I regret because my son has lifelong side effects from taking risperidone. And for anybody who knows anything about that, you can go and look up the tort lawsuit that there was about that medication. He has lifelong effects that eventually we're going to have to find the money to have surgery on in order to reverse these damn side effects, because the freaking schools tell you that kids who can't sit still because they don't want to be in a classroom for 8 hours a day have freaking ADHD, and you got to shove a whole bunch of freaking pills down their throat. Okay. No, I'm glad that I got wise and smart and stopped all that shit, but it was too late. There was already a lot of damage done. And it's because you get told, well, your kid can't be still. They obviously have ADHD. They have ADD. They have OCD. They have ODD. They have all these things, and you want to believe them. You want to believe them. Except tell me why my kids haven't taken those pills in years and we've never had a single issue. They can focus just fine. Okay? I don't agree with how all of a sudden everybody has autism. You go and look at TikTok and you literally will scroll and see 1,000 people saying they think they have autism. They think they have this. They think they have that. Just like my kids didn't need ADHD medications back in the day. Let's be so for freaking real right now. All these kids that are out here being told by the schools, oh, you need to take this pill, you need to take this pill. No, you don't. I don't believe that everybody in the mama has autism either. That's the problem. I really can what? Sing? Oh, far from joking, honey. Far from joking. Yeah. And we started doing natural things. The self-diagnosing is out of control. And you know, it got so bad. Okay, Ariel really does have tics. And she had wanted for a long time to come out and like talk about her tics on TikTok because they came in like a weird time. It used to be where she would like have these weird involuntary movements where her head would go out and sideways and she would make a freaking bird noise. Okay. She was worried about going to restaurants. She didn't want to go in public. And I was always scared to death that she was going to freaking choke. Like she was going to have one of these crazy things where she did this thing with her neck and made these noises while she was eating and she was going to freaking choke. But she didn't want to go out and talk about it because so many people were out there faking it. So many people are out here faking it. Having tics, faking having cancers. I'm talking like there are social media influencers who have millions of followers that the money from having the millions of followers isn't enough. You got to fake having cancer to get money. It's too much. Too much. That too. Back in the day, the word autism was really associated with people that could not honestly take care of themselves. And that's not the case. That's the three. You ain't never lie. Because let me tell you, the stuff that's in the food out there, it's true. All that's true. See, that's the thing. It's cute to be screwed up now. That's what everyone thinks. Oh, and they will. They'll try to shame you, but I don't give a hot goddamn anymore. You know why? Because they're my kids. And I'm going to do whatever I need to do. And they can kiss my fat ass. Just like my youngest son, he only had like his first year of vaccinations that were extremely, extremely important. After that, we stopped. Because Ariel had vaccine injuries. We had other people in the family that had vaccine injuries, and I got him when he needed, and we stopped. He has never been sick. He has never been sick. My kids that were fully vaccinated all the way up until they were teenagers, that were on all these freaking medications and that were in public school, were sick all the freaking time. All the freaking time. My son, my oldest son, has not been sick in like 8 years. Okay? Has not been sick in 8 freaking years. My youngest son, just sometimes, I think he has whatever his dad has, because a lot of his stomach issues is a lot of the same stuff that I used to have to like, I used to witness his dad have whenever we were still together. But that's like some sort of hereditary thing, and it's just not even a big deal. He's already actually seen a doctor about it a long time ago, and it's just something that's like IBS type thing, but not really that bad. Not bad enough to need medications. We just watch what he eats. We just watch what he eats. And he doesn't have stomach issues anymore because we pay attention. And that's the thing. Why do all these crazy people want to just throw a bunch of labels on themselves while also claiming that they don't want to be part of labels? Like, the whole thing is just wild. The whole thing is just wild. See? That's how I feel about my youngest. He only had up to the year. Me and his dad agreed on that. Like, that's the one thing that we agreed on, was the vaccination situation and school. Isn't that wild? Absolutely wild. Oh yeah, Rain Man is a good movie though. Well, see, we really thought that my daughter needed it, and then we took her off of them, and she never had an issue. She never once had a problem. And she was on them for a decade. There's 2 Gretchens in the chat. Are y'all freaking out? That's funny. 2 Gretchens in chat. That's wild. Well, I still refused. And I did not let my kids do it either. And that was not fair that they try to make everyone... They want to talk about my body, my choice, but then it came to that. They didn't allow you to have a choice without making you feel like it was your fault for crazy shit happening. Which is crap. Exactly. Yeah, I feel like that way too. I feel like we definitely slipped into some alternate universe. I for real feel like that. So for real. Yeah, because now look how many people are getting hired back with back pay. With back pay. I just can't believe the craziness that came from that. It is absolutely wild. And who knows the side effects that's going to end up happening. That's what I'm really worried about. The side effects. I don't even want to know how bad it's going to end up being. Okay. The increase in awareness of ASD has coincided with greater efforts by the criminal legal system to account for the role that intellectual disabilities, developmental disorders, and mental health conditions play in offending behavior. For example, as of December 31st of 2023, there were 655 mental health courts in the United States. I've got the freaking hiccups. In the United States, across 42 states and the District of Columbia. 655 mental health courts. There's only 50 states in the United States, and that's only in 42 of the states. That's more than 10 per state. That's wild. That's wild. 2 states have enacted legislation barring people with serious mental illness from being sentenced to death. ASD specifically has been deemed relevant to defendants' interactions with law enforcement and ability to formulate criminal intent. Evidence of defendant's ASD relevant to jury's determination of whether he possessed specific intent required for aiding and abetting. Unpublished opinion from 2008 reversing defendant's conviction for driving under the influence, where physical impairment interpreted by law enforcement as intoxication could have been explained by defendant's Asperger's syndrome. So I guess there was a case where, you know what, I think I heard this before. I feel like I just watched this on the news not long ago, where somebody got in trouble for driving while intoxicated, but it turned out they actually just had like a disorder and they weren't tested. And he got arrested, and then he ended up having to prove, I'm not impaired. I am impaired this way. but I'm not impaired this way, so you're wrong, broski. And he won like a lawsuit. I could have sworn that just like happened not very long ago. But they're talking about something that happened in 2008. And this definitely was like an older gentleman that I just watched on the news talking about this like 2 months ago. I feel like this just happened not long ago. In State versus Burr from 2007, an appellate court reversed a defendant's convictions of SA in endangering the welfare of a child because the trial court erred in excluding evidence of the defendant's Asperger's syndrome. See, no. Hell to the nah. I don't care. If you have Asperger's, you know not to be diddling little kids. Okay? I don't. See, this is where this document's going to start making me mad. Because now we're going to know about all the ways that people got out from doing horrible things because of something like Asperger's. This document's going to get on my nerves. The defendant proffered the evidence to assist the jury in understanding why he might act in a way that appears socially unacceptable to others. In holding that the trial courts abused its discretion by disallowing the evidence, the appellate court noted the trial would have been a more fair and complete adversarial process if, in evaluating the evidence and the inferences urged by the state, jurors were aware that defendant's mental disability prevents him from viewing the world as others do in terms of acceptable social interactions. People with Asperger's know not to touch little kids. I can't believe they're going to fight their argument with, well, this dude touched this kid, but he had ASD, so it's fine. How about now? The interaction between ASD and the death penalty has gained recent attention with the case of Robert Robertson. Oh boy. This is a wild one. I've been watching this case because it's here in Texas, but I don't know the truth to it. And there's a lot of information, but there's also not a lot of information because I don't know if they're going to get into it. They might. Yeah, they are going to get into it. This man was convicted and put on death row for shaken baby syndrome because his child died. And what they are actually stating is that she actually had an undiagnosed medical condition, and it wasn't shaken baby syndrome at all. It was actually like she died from the medical condition. And the guy that like helped convict him had like come out and said that now he feels bad for it. It's a big thing. It's a big thing. I probably need to put a video together and like talk about it because it's a big thing. It's a big thing. An autistic man sentenced to death in Texas for the alleged murder of his daughter. In addition to challenging the scientific laws underpinning his daughter's diagnosis of shaken baby syndrome, Mr. Robertson argues that his ASD contributed to his wrongful conviction because law enforcement misinterpreted his flat affect during the tragedy as evidence of guilt. So because he wasn't overly emotional at the fact that his infant daughter had died, they instantly thought that it's because he did it, not because he had autism. And they also didn't care. Like, it almost gave them tunnel vision. It gave them tunnel vision. There was a medical diagnosis, but he didn't shake her. Her brain was swollen. And they ended up finding out later, yeah, the police officer admitted to lying, and the prosecutor came out and said that he feels bad for what's happening, and he was trying to come out and like try to fix it. But at this point, this man spent like years and years and years and years and years on death row, and now at the last minute, whenever you're about to freaking pull the plug, now you want to come out and say something. How are you still having a job waiting this freaking long to come out and talk about it? But she had an actual medical condition that ended up being diagnosed after the fact. And it attributed to her brain injury that was there was literally because of her medical condition, not because he actually did anything to her. I just don't understand why they waited so long to come out and say anything, because now, like, he's on his last chance, literally on his last chance. There's a petition for commutation of the death sentence to a lesser penalty, or, let him go. Because if they can really literally prove that she died from a medical condition, then why the hell is he in there? Let him out. Give him some money and let him go on and live the rest that he's got. It's absolutely wild. Mr. Robertson's plight, including his argument about ASD, has attracted widespread media attention. John Grisham has talked about it. There's an article from David Goodman. There's all kinds of stuff that's been talked about it. I guess I'll go ahead and give y'all this one. Y'all can read up about it here. Well, I don't want to click on it. I want to give y'all the link. Here it is. Okay. That should be the article. Y'all should be able to click on the article and read it. Okay. Oh, look, the Marshall Project, the same people that did the story on Lucas Anderson. Remember the guy whose DNA was underneath the fingernails of a murder victim that he didn't have anything to do with killing? Let me redo that because there's something wrong with it. That guy. They also did an article on this, so that's pretty cool. Okay. Mr. Robertson has also garnered support from a broad coalition ranging from the lead detective who investigated his case to judges, psychologists, and advocates. Petition for commutation of death sentence at 1016. I guess that's something that they put in there. Even the Texas legislature has rallied behind Mr. Robertson. A bipartisan group of 84 state lawmakers wrote in support of his clemency petition. That's a big deal. Standards. Oh, see how they put this too close to this and it makes it look like it's the end of the page. It has now been over 2 decades since the United States Supreme Court held that evolving standards of decency mandate a categorical bar on the execution of people with intellectual disabilities. As detailed in Part 1, people with ASD exhibit many of the same impairments as people with intellectual disabilities. The overlap is apparent in Idaho's own intellectual disability statute, which, in addition of a showing of significantly sub-average intellectual functioning, requires a showing of significant limitations in adaptive functioning in at least 2 of the following skill areas: communication, self-care, home living, social or interpersonal skills, use of community resources, self-direction, functional academic skills, work, leisure, health, and safety. If evolving standards of decency 20 years ago condemned the execution of people with intellectual disabilities due to the impairments associated with their condition, it follows that execution of people with ASD who share nearly identical deficits is equally deplorable. Death sentences for people with ASD are inherently unreliable because defendants with ASD cannot present mitigation evidence that will be meaningfully considered by the jury. The United States Supreme Court has long held that the qualitative difference between death and other penalties calls for a greater degree of reliability when the death sentence is imposed. In Lockett, the court held that this heightened need for reliability required the consideration of mitigation evidence because the sentencer's possession of the full... Oh, I felt like I skipped a sentence. Because the sentencer's possession of the fullest information possible concerning the defendant's life and characteristics is highly relevant, if not essential, to the selection of an appropriate sentence. And this is Williams versus New York from 1949. Therefore, a statute that prevents the sentencer in all capital cases from giving independent mitigating weight to aspects of the defendant's character and record and to circumstances of the offense proffered in mitigation creates the risk that the death penalty will be imposed in spite of factors which may call for a less severe penalty. When the choice is between life and death, the risk is unacceptable and incompatible with the commands of the 8th and 14th Amendments. Critically, the heightened need for reliability is not satisfied by the mere presentation of mitigating evidence. Lockett and its progeny not only established a defendant's right to present mitigating evidence to the sentencing judge or jury, but it also required that the sentencer give that mitigating evidence effect. In Eddings, the defendant presented mitigating evidence regarding his troubled childhood at trial, but the judge disregarded it, commenting that he did not believe that the law permitted him to consider it under mitigation. The court reversed Eddings' death sentence, holding that the judge committed constitutional error by refusing to consider the mitigating evidence. The court held, just as the state may not by statute preclude the sentencer from considering any mitigating factor, neither may the sentencer refuse to consider, as a matter of law, any relevant mitigating evidence. While the sentencer and reviewing courts may determine what relative weight to assign to the mitigation, they may not give it no weight by excluding such evidence from their consideration. In her concurring opinion, Justice O'Connor reiterated that the concern for reliability embodied in Lockett motivated the court's holding. Because sentences of death are qualitatively different from prison sentences, this court has gone to extraordinary measures to ensure that the prisoner's sentence to be executed is afforded process that will guarantee, as much as humanly possible, that the sentence was not imposed out of whim, passion, prejudice, or mistake. The trial judge's belief that he was not permitted to consider Edding's troubled youth undermined the reliability of the sentencing determination and revealed an impermissible risk that the death penalty was erroneously imposed on an insufficiently culpable defendant. In Penry versus Lionel, the court again examined the crucial role of mitigating evidence in reliable determinations about culpability. Penry challenged the constitutionality of the Texas sentencing statute because it did not permit the jury to fully consider and give effect to the mitigating evidence of his intellectual disability and childhood A in its capital sentencing determination. I know I've said the N word like a whole bunch, but I'm trying not to get in trouble with YouTube, so gotta be careful. In evaluating Penry's claim, the court reviewed the link between the senator's consideration of mitigating evidence and reliable capital sentencing. Underlying Lockett and Eadings is the principle that punishment should be directly related to the personal culpability of the criminal defendant. If the sentencer is to make an individualized assessment of the appropriateness of the death penalty, evidence about the defendant's background and character is relevant because of the belief, long held by this society, that defendants who commit criminal acts that are attributable to a disadvantaged background or the emotional and mental problems may be less culpable than defendants who have no such excuse. Moreover, Eddings, is it Eadings? I almost feel like it's supposed to be Eadings. I feel like it's probably supposed to be Eadings. I feel like I've heard it before. I'm going to keep saying Eddings. Eddings makes clear that it is not enough simply to allow the defendant to present mitigating evidence to the sentencer. The sentencer must also be able to consider and give effect to that evidence in imposing sentence. Give me 1 second. Okay. Let's see. The senator must also be able to consider and give effect to that evidence in imposing sentence. Only then can we be sure that the sentencer has treated the defendant as a uniquely individual human being and has made a reliable determination that death is the appropriate sentence. The court agreed that because the Texas sentencing scheme did not permit the jury to give evidence in Penry's intellectual disability and background, mitigating effect such that a reliable determination about his moral culpability could be made, it violated the 8th and 14th Amendments. In line with its commitment to ensuring the reliability of capital proceedings, the Atkins and Roper courts articulated a rationale for excluding juveniles and intellectually disabled defendants from the death penalty that is independent from the proportionality analysis discussed in parts 1 through 3. The characteristics of youth and intellectual disability create an unacceptable risk of wrongful execution because they hamper the defendant's ability to present mitigation evidence. The court acknowledged that defendants with intellectual disabilities are unable to make a persuasive showing of mitigation in the face of prosecutorial evidence of one or more aggravating factors where, 1, they are less able to give meaningful assistance to their counsel, and 2, their demeanor may create an unwarranted impression of lack of remorse for their crimes. 3, they are typically poor witnesses. And 4, the mitigation presented can be a two-edged sword that may enhance the likelihood that the aggravating factor of future dangerousness will be found by the jury. And then it talks about Roper. A defendant's youth may even be counted against him. Well, I mean, talking about a kid not doing certain things or doing certain things when he should know better is one thing. But again, when it comes to taking a life, or doing to somebody something by force, you're taught that at a very young age. And even if your parents don't do what they should be doing by teaching you that, You get taught that in public school. It's like rule number 1 is keep your freaking hands to yourself. Like, seriously, it's the first thing that we learn as a child. Because these concerns apply with at least equal force to someone with ASD, the 8th and 14th Amendments also prohibit the imposition of the death penalty in this case. Defendants with ASD are less able to meaningfully assist their counsel. Again, just like how I feel they can't use autism as an excuse if he is found guilty, again, miraculously, I doubt it, but miraculously, they can't say that he's unable to assist his counsel. Because Loomis Taylor ain't never tried this whole standing silent shit before. And now all of a sudden she's doing it for everybody. Probably because Bryan, had the idea. I feel like there's a lot of things he's probably helped with because he's doing this as, for a living. He's into this criminal justice stuff. So I don't agree with this argument. I don't agree with this argument at all. The key diagnostic criteria for ASD, social deficits, and repetitive behaviors and interest significantly hamper an autistic defendant's ability to meaningfully assist counsel, particularly in the unique context of capital defense. The first and most critical step in adequate capital representation is establishing rapport with the client. Establishing a relationship of trust with the client is essential both to overcome the client's natural resistance to disclosing the often personal and painful facts necessary to present an effective penalty phase defense and to ensure that the client will listen to counsel's advice on important matters such as whether to testify and the advisability of a plea. Again, this is not saying this is happening in this case. Let's just hope people don't go stupid on something that has nothing to do with anything right now, okay? The American Bar Association guidelines for the appointment and performance of defense counsel in death penalty cases is where I guess they're getting this information from. The social and communication deficits associated with ASD, discussed in Part 1, pose a major barrier to developing the necessary rapport between counsel and client for effective capital representation. For example, people often convey warmth through nonverbal cues such as posture, facial expression, and tone, which clients with ASD will not be able to recognize or interpret, which is true. They have really bad social cues. They can't really read your face. They can't read a room. They can't tell how you're feeling by the tone of your voice or how you're saying something or the look on your face or how you're sitting in a chair. They don't have the ability for that. They just don't. It's like it's just that part of their brain is just empty. The second diagnostic criterion, repetitive behaviors and interest, often manifest as hyperfocus on a particular topic at the exclusion of all others. Capital cases involve an enormous volume of information across different subjects. In this case, the state has provided 68 terabytes of discovery. And again, we need to remember that that is not all Bryan's information. A lot of that is records for the victims for certain things. And technically, I guess a bunch of camera footage that honestly doesn't matter because just like we saw on the list where we were going over the stuff that's been actually added to discovery or that the state intends to actually have in trial, the Ridge Road address isn't even on there. Like the camera from Ridge Road isn't even listed as part of the stuff they're going to be actually turning in. So how much of the 68 terabytes is actually going to be part of anything? I don't know. A fragment maybe? To make informed decisions, a capital client must be able to comprehend the full landscape of his case. For defendants with ASD, their fixation on a single theory or piece of evidence will impair their ability to see the case in its entirety and make reasoned decisions about its direction. Relatedly, people with ASD tend to be rigid in their thinking and struggle with decision-making. Listing extreme distress at small changes, difficulties with transitions, rigid thinking patterns as examples of behavior that meet diagnostic criteria for ASD. And if you have to think about that too, him having Asperger's or ASD at all, it was probably a pretty for real mental twitch for him when he moved all the way to freaking Washington from Pennsylvania. Like he's a far away from home. So I can imagine it would probably have like an effect on that. A complex capital case will rarely follow a linear trajectory. As the investigation and evidence evolve, so will the defense's strategy, and the client must be able to adapt. For capital defendants, the ability to pivot from a defense focused on innocence to one that is devoted to mitigation or the ability to decide whether to accept a plea or risk a trial, or whether to suspend the short-term goal of proceeding to trial in order to achieve the long-term goal of fair and reliable adversarial proceedings, is literally a matter of life or death. Particularly under the enormous and unparalleled pressure of a capital prosecution, a defendant with ASD is likely to exhibit extreme inflexibility even in the face of necessity, or become overwhelmed to the point of decision paralysis. Decision paralysis. Incapable of choosing one or the other. These impairments cannot simply be overcome by a client who wants to be cooperative. Mr. Kohberger displays extremely rigid thinking, preservates on specific topics, processes information on a piecemeal basis, struggles to plan ahead, and demonstrates little insight into his own behaviors or emotions. Struggles to plan ahead. That definitely takes away him being able to plan this out the way they're trying to say that he did. Doesn't it? Struggles to plan ahead. Even assuming Mr. Kohberger aims to be as helpful as possible in preparing the case, these mental deficiencies will invade every detail of that aid, from client relationship to fact investigation to mitigation investigation to pretrial motions to trial strategy. No matter how helpful Mr. Kohberger may wish to be, it is simply not possible for him to aid counsel in a way that someone without the deficits accompanying ASD would be able to. I don't know. I still feel like he's helping. But then again, that's just because we've been told he's really smart. His Asperger's might be stopping him from being capable because of the high stress situation. So I guess there's a possibility he's not helping. He might be giving suggestions, maybe whenever he felt more comfortable. But if he's losing a bunch of weight and his language barriers are starting to show, then I don't know, maybe not. This lack of ability is the precise concern articulated in Adkins. The demeanor of a defendant with ASD will likely create an unwarranted impression of lack of remorse, which we've seen that too. Like, he never really has an expression on his face at all. He kind of is just there. He's kind of just there. I mean, yeah, like it makes sense. It makes all the sense. At the stages of the proceedings, the defendant's behavior, manner, facial expressions, and emotional responses, or their absence, combine to make an overall impression on the trier of fact, an impression that can have a powerful influence on the outcome of the trial. Concerns about jurors' impressions of a defendant's remorse or lack thereof apply with equal force to persons afflicted with ASD as they do those with intellectual disabilities. Demeanor is particularly important in capital trials when the defendant's life is at stake. Serious prejudice could result if the defendant's capacity to react and respond to the proceedings and to demonstrate remorse or compassion is inhibited. The prejudice can be acute during the sentencing phase of the proceedings, when the sentencer must attempt to know the heart and mind of the offender and judge his character, his contrition or its absence, and his future dangerousness. In a capital sentencing proceeding, assessments of character and remorse may carry great weight and perhaps be determinative of whether the offender lives or dies. Indeed, substantial social science research bears Justice Kennedy's observations out. Many scholars have determined that alongside the possibility of a defendant's future dangerousness, a defendant perceived remorselessness is perhaps a best predictor of whether a jury will sentence a person to death. Does Richard Allen have autism? They do. I don't want to put the wrong one up. I'll have to look for that stuff. Because I don't know if that's where like he met her, or if she met him behind the scenes before that. It's possible. Okay, so this is another book written in 1998. finding that 69% of jurors within the study who voted for death cited remorselessness as a reason, and that many indicated it was the most compelling reason for their vote. Yeah, I don't know either. I ask because, well, you know what? I guess not. I only asked because like suddenly what the weird ass juror chick said about how he was like always staring at them like in a certain way or whatever kind of just hit my face. But then I also remembered like he was really emotional whenever he was looking at crime scene photos and stuff. And like it even got to the point to where I think one of the lawyers put their arm around Richard Allen because he was getting like really emotional looking at, you know, pictures of children that had been mutilated. Because again, I don't think Richard Allen did it either. I don't think he did it either. So that's why I was wondering. But I mean, he might not. He was pretty, he emoted a lot. From what we're understanding, what we've heard, he emoted a lot. Therefore, as with the intellectually disabled, there is a substantial risk that the demeanor of a defendant with ASD may create an unwarranted impression of lack of remorse for their crimes. Due to the physical manifestations of their disability, people with ASD are particularly vulnerable to bias on account of their courtroom demeanor. The diagnostic criteria for ASD list repetitive motor movements, echolalia, echolalia, I'm guessing that's how you say it. Echolalia is the repetition of words, phrases, and noises that are heard. Okay, so basically like a parrot. Repeating things and repeating noises. Okay. And excessive smelling or touching of objects as symptoms of ASD. And then it talks about something from the Center of Disease Control. People with ASD often engage in repetitive self-stimulating behavior, which can include hand flapping, finger snapping, and body rocking. A juror seeing the defendant engage in one of those behaviors while sitting at counsel table during a murder trial would perceive the defendant is strange, out of control, and even disrespectful of such a solemn proceeding. I can understand. I know exactly. Yeah, I agree with what they're saying. It can make it look like they're like not really paying attention, not really there, off in their own world, like they just don't care. Like they just don't care. But that's not technically the case for certain people. Subtler indicators of ASD can be just as damning for capital defendants, if not more so. Inability to make and maintain eye contact is a common symptom of ASD, which can be mistakenly interpreted as guilt or shame. Berryessa 2021, due to their difficulty recognizing the emotions of others, people with ASD make facial expressions that are awkward and incongruent with the tone of the proceedings. Exactly. They can't read the room. They can't. What's the word? Acclimate. They can't acclimate. They can't read the room. They can't melt into the situation. They will always stand out. They will always be whatever's in their head instead of what's in front of them. Most concerningly for capital defendants, people with ASD often display a flat affect even in the face of highly emotional evidence, which can be interpreted as coldness or lack of remorse. Mr. Kohberger's ASD manifests in many of these highly prejudicial but completely involuntary mannerisms. Dr. Orr observed that he subtly rocks his upper torso, especially while engaged in a cognitive task or listening to someone else, both of which are almost certain to occur during his trial. Have we ever seen him do that? So let's stop for a second. Now I'm going to look at the chat. Have we ever seen him rock back and forth? Especially now that the cameras are always on the table. Have we ever seen him actually do that? Because there's been some of these things that have lasted hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. He does have a bounce. I noticed that he moves his hands a lot, but a lot of it's like under the table, so you can't really see it. I've never seen him like act. I've never seen him physically rocking, unless it's like so small movements that you really can't tell. He does hold pretty damn still. I haven't noticed it. I noticed his hands moving a lot, But I haven't ever noticed him rocking back and forth. Not even in this last one where he looked like crap. I haven't seen it either. Yeah, I don't really see him moving at all. Like, again, I see his hands moving sometimes, but that's pretty much it. That's pretty much it. Okay. His range of facial expressions is limited. His baseline affect is stoic, and his expressions are sometimes incongruent with what's happening around him. Mr. Kohberger also exhibits atypical eye contact, including an intense gaze. As discussed below in part, I'm not good with Roman numerals. Mr. Kohberger's facial expressions, including his lack of affect and concentrated stare, are already being assigned sinister meaning by observers. And that's true. Very much true. But then again, the girls in class have a huge crush on him. So I believe their take over the courts because they knew him in the real world. Jurors begin assessing a case from the moment they step into the courtroom. In this case, where jurors will be forced to determine whether Mr. Kohberger will live or die, Mr. Kohberger himself is essentially a piece of evidence to be examined and evaluated. Every moment and expression is subject to analysis. Due to his ASD, Mr. Kohberger simply cannot comport himself in a manner that aligns with societal expectations of normalcy. This creates an unconscionable risk that he will be executed because of his disability rather than his culpability. That's what I said. That's why this stuff coming out now is dumb. People with ASD make poor witnesses. Concerns about the demeanor of a defendant with ASD apply with greater force when he chooses to take the stand in his own defense. Now, we have not heard either way, but I'm going to assume that standing silent means he's probably not going to take the stand. Both verbal and nonverbal communication with the jury is impeded by the deficits experienced by someone with ASD, perhaps to an even greater degree than someone with intellectual disability who may not experience the same level of social impairment. A person with ASD will struggle on the witness stand in myriad ways. Aside from atypical social behaviors, individuals with ASD may exhibit uncommon verbal or speaking patterns. Sometimes their phrasing is unusual, nonsensical, and exceedingly formal. They may take a long time to answer questions, which may appear evasive. They may also let out sudden and unexpected verbal utterances, which might come across as rude. They may also misinterpret or nitpick questions asked of them during questioning or cross-examination. For instance, defendants may fail to pick up on cues which signal the end of a line of questioning or attempt to shift the conversation to a topic of their interest, meaning, I don't really give a crap what you're asking me. This is what I want to talk about. Such behavior may be misunderstood as the defendant being cagey or unwilling to discuss a particular area or answer questions. As another example, when questioned in the jury trial, a defendant with ASD instigated arguments with the prosecutor over a comparatively trivial detail while failing, unless redirected, to confront the underlying and critical question. Due to the deficits associated with ASD, a defendant like Mr. Kohberger is just as likely as someone with intellectual disability to make a poor witness. Mr. Kohberger's speech is awkward, both in its content and delivery. As Dr. Orr observed, his tone and cadence are abnormal, his interactions lack fluidity, and his language is often over-inclusive, disorganized, highly repetitive, and oddly formal. He is highly distracted by sounds or activity occurring around him, and he frequently looks from side to side to monitor his periphery. As a result of his high distractibility, he often needs questions or instructions repeated. He frequently shifts the topic back to himself, even when it's inappropriate. He uses abrupt, matter-of-fact phrases that would be considered rude. He carries on about topics in a circular manner and preservates about specific, non-essential details. These symptoms of Mr. Kohberger's ASD will alienate him from the jury and significantly hamper his ability to make a persuasive showing of innocence or of mitigation. The more that they describe him, he sounds just like Sheldon freaking Cooper. The more they describe him, the more he sounds like Sheldon freaking Cooper. Evidence of a defendant's ASD will likely be perceived by the jury as aggravating instead of mitigating, and it shouldn't. It shouldn't. It is well recognized by courts and scholars alike that evidence of ASD, like intellectual disability in youth, is a two-edged sword. Why are they using that? All of my life, all 37 years of my life, I've always heard it said double-edged sword. I'd never seen it actually described as a two-edged sword. The phrasing is always double-edged sword. I mean, not like it matters, but I still find it funny that they're using something that isn't the typical way to phrase that. And then they talk about Roper, and it says that increases the likelihood that a defendant will be seen as dangerous and as a result sentenced to death. Trial counsel not ineffective for failing to present evidence of defendant's ASD due to the risk that the jury would perceive him as mentally ill monster who could not control his impulses to essay kids. If you're essaying kids, I don't care what you think your diagnosis is. You know better. I don't care. You know better. Testimony at sentencing about defendant's autism and compulsive nature gave court reason to be concerned about incorrigibility. And then it talks about Mamone versus Jenkins from 2022. No, from 2019. And then something that happened in the Sixth Circuit in 2022. Capital defendant's insistence that he did the right thing by taking his kid's life, a belief which post-conviction counsel attributed to his ASD, perhaps made the case for death even stronger. I don't think you thinking that you have some sort of higher calling to take your kids' lives away has crap to do with autism. Just wild. Okay. Just wild. In one study, several trial judges who were interviewed regarding the impact of ASD on sentencing believed ASD would be an aggravating factor, as an individual's inability to control his behavior may be an inherent danger and threat to himself, others, and public safety. And then there's another link to something written by that Barry Essa lady. The risk that the jury's fear about the defendant's future dangerousness will overshadow the mitigating force of defense evidence is especially pronounced in cases of ASD. ASD is beyond the comprehension of most jurors, and it is chronic, permanent, and untreatable. Research has found that neurotypical adults demonstrate negative implicit bias against adults with ASD. Moreover, and particularly relevant to Mr. Kohberger's case and the media frenzy surrounding it, heightened media attention on ASD-associated crimes has raised public alarm over the possible link between an autism diagnosis and violent behavior. Although there is little research on juror perceptivity to ASD as mitigation evidence, studies have repeatedly found that jurors view evidence of serious mental illness as aggravating rather than mitigating. Several analyses demonstrate that although jurors believe in the abstract that mental health evidence will make them less likely impose death, in reality, that evidence is often presented and discounted, presented and ignored, or presented, rejected, and treated as an aggravator. One study of capital jurors who voted for death in cases where mental illness was a factor found that nearly half of jurors either treated it as aggravating factor or reported that it had no impact on their decision at all. The same study also revealed that evidence of mental illness became irrelevant to some jurors if the facts of the crime were particularly brutal, that jurors often express concern about mentally ill defendants' future dangerousness, especially where there appeared to be less potential for rehabilitation, that jurors often perceived a defendant's lack of emotion at trial as a lack of remorse rather than a symptom of mental illness, and that jurors were highly skeptical of defendants' claims of mental illness, often believing the defendant was malingering to manipulate the system and escape punishment. Malingering. Like Gypsy Rose. Because she actually wasn't a real victim. Let's just be so for real. The real capital juries are routinely transmorgifying, mitigating evidence into evidence warranting execution, demonstrates the inability to address this problem through jury selection or instructions. A capital sentencer must be able to give meaningful consideration and effect to all mitigating evidence that might provide a basis for refusing to impose the death penalty on a particular individual, notwithstanding the severity of his crime or his potential to commit similar offenses in the future. Give me just 1 second. You ain't never lie. She is dangerous. She's dangerous as shit. Dangerous as shit. I watch everything Conspiracy puts out about that girl because I just can't believe she's got so many people that don't see it. So many people that don't see it, and there's so much going on in the background. Well, my whole thing with following that case is that there needs to be something else happening for Nick. There needs to be something else happening for Nick. I mean, look, honestly, that weird ass chick that came out saying that she had some sort of date with him or some shit. I mean, it's an autistic thing to tell somebody that you got good birthing hips. So maybe it was, maybe that story was real. It's very possible. Very, very possible. Sounds like something somebody autistic would say to somebody. I like your birthing hips. Very possible. That's hilarious. Thinking back to that now after knowing all this. It's possible. Let's see, where were we? Okay. Acknowledging that the prosecutor's argument improperly led jurors to believe that evidence of intellectual disability should be considered aggravating in sentencing. However, experience shows that reality is different. Despite their impairments, these defendants are more likely to be sentenced to death. Holding that defendants with cognitive and behavioral impairments of intellectual disability are less morally culpable. Defendants who commit criminal acts that are attributable, did I say it like way too fast and I feel like I said it wrong, but now I feel like I can't say it again. Attributable to emotional and mental problems may be less culpable than defendants who have no such excuse. This court addressed the reality that evidence of mental illness is often, there it is, there's the right way to frickin' say it, double-edged sword, in its November 20th, 2024 memorandum decision and order on death penalty motions, hereinafter order on death penalty motions. Citing Penry, the court denied Mr. Kohberger's motion to strike the propensity aggravator on the grounds that double-edged evidence is dealt with through instructions on the mitigation side, not through striking an aggravator. Order on death penalty motions at 19. However, the United States Supreme Court overruled Penry and Atkins and explicitly held that the double-edged nature of intellectual disability evidence is one reason why defendants with intellectual disabilities cannot be sentenced to death in accordance with the 8th and 14th Amendments, reliability requirements. The Supreme Court reiterated this principle when it categorically barred execution of juvenile offenders in Roper. Noting that the prosecution had argued that the defendant's youth was aggravating rather than mitigating, the court specifically rejected anything less than a categorical exclusion to address the problem. While this sort of overreaching could be corrected by a particular rule to ensure that the mitigating force of youth is not overlooked, that would not address our larger concerns. Thus, the Supreme Court has clearly established that where mitigating disability evidence may be mutated into an aggravator, the remedy is not a mere jury instruction, but exclusion of death as a sentencing outcome. That's not true. They just don't need to be talking about this crap unless somebody's actually convicted. They could have it ready. They can have all this stuff ready to go and have deadlines for it needing to be ready to go for in cases, but none of this should be presented until after somebody's actually convicted. Let's be so for real. Hold on a second. Okay. Even if this court rejects a categorical approach, it should remove the death penalty because case-specific factors create an unacceptable risk that a death sentence will be imposed in spite of factors requiring a lesser sentence, including a pervasive media narrative that assigns sinister meaning to symptoms of Mr. Kohberger's disability. They're already doing it. The second that the title posted to the case summary, everyone lost their shit and started lying about what this was. Like, we literally witnessed, like, I'm telling you right now, they posted this shit, and Ann Taylor and Eliza Massaw and Jay Logsdon and Bicca Barlow probably went into a room with Bryan Kohberger and turned on the TV and just waited for the news, and instantly saw everything that they did not want happening when only the title of the document was released. Everything they said was going to happen played out in real time. It's absolutely wild. Even if the court does not find that a categorical exclusion is warranted, the lack of reliability inherent to any death sentence imposed upon Mr. Kohberger provides independent grounds to strike death in this case. There is no need to speculate about what impact Mr. Kohberger's ASD might have on his ability to present a meaningful defense. The prejudice is already clear. It is. In its decision transferring venue of Mr. Kohberger's case, the Latell County Court acknowledged the extraordinary media attention received by this case. Much of that attention focused on Mr. Kohberger himself, in particular, on his disability. That's not technically true, because we didn't actually have any full-on proof that he had autism until very recently. We all just pretty much were speculating based on the behaviors and the things that we had heard. So I guess it's sort of correct, but not really, because we didn't have the disability label until recently. Outlets ranging from the New York Times to true crime video bloggers have assigned nefarious meanings to symptoms of Mr. Kohberger's ASD. Multiple news sources have, for example, focused on Mr. Kohberger's social deficits, particularly as they relate to his interactions with women. Are they going to talk about the birthing hip chick? Oh my goodness. NBC News accused Mr. Kohberger of making creepy comments to female staff at a brewery. See, this is the one that I wanted to try to freaking figure out, okay? I was talking to my friend about this the other day, and he had never heard this before. But there was somebody going around saying that Bryan Kohberger used to go to a bar in Pennsylvania, and that he would say certain things to chicks after he would drink a few beers, and that the owner knew for a fact that it was Bryan Kohberger, because they had a copy of his driver's license in the system, so that they knew whenever he came in, like, everyone just knew he to watch for him or to not let him in there or anything like that. You know, one thing they didn't do? Prove his ID was in the system. As far as I know, there was no proof of him ever even entering that damn bar. There was no camera footage showed. There was no interview from one of the girls that he apparently harassed, as far as I can remember. There was no real proof. There was nothing to prove that the person they were talking about was actually Bryan Kohberger. They took this dude's freaking story time and made it like it was some sort of like official something. With no proof. With no proof. I'll put this link in there for y'all. No proof. No ID. No ID copy. Nothing. Yeah, the owner came out and talked about it, but they never showed the ID. They never showed any proof of the ID being in the system or that Bryan was the actual person they were talking about. It was just a story, as far as I know. But I remember reading into this and looking into it. I never saw any proof that the person they were talking about was actually Bryan. They didn't show the proof that it was actually Bryan. If they did, let me know and I'll look it up myself and we'll address it. But I haven't seen anything showing that his freaking ID was even in the system. There was no picture of his face somewhere up saying, don't let this dude in here. None of those things. As far as I can tell, there was none of that happening. The New York Times ran an article alleging that Mr. Kohberger made female students at Washington State University feel uncomfortable, though an investigation by the university cleared Mr. Kohberger of any wrongdoings. So you're going to sit there and try to tell me, GG, that he got freaking fired? If this is literally saying that he was cleared of anything, this is proof right here, even more proof right here, that the whole story of him getting in trouble with his professors and all the other bullshit that caused him to get fired is a damn lie, because they just said that he was cleared of this investigation. So what was he really in trouble for at WSU? It is defamation. And this is NBC and the New York Times at this point. So I wonder if they're going to mention the thing about the story of him helping the lady with her security camera, because Bryan Kohberger, apparently was friends with the girl who thought somebody broke into her apartment, and she felt he was a safe option for her to go to. Like, she went to him. She went to him and asked for his help to come and put the cameras in the security system in her place. They twisted him being a helpful person to somebody who considered him a friend and a safe person. They flipped that to, well, he must have broken into her apartment. He must have rummaged through her drawers and did all of this because he planned thousands of years ahead of time that if he went into her apartment and did some stuff to make her feel unsafe, he's going to be the person that she runs to. Even though they just proved in this that, he can't plan. He's incapable of planning ahead. So how do you do that? How do you do that? They took a story of him being a good guy and twisted it and lied and made their own assumptions with no proof. With no proof. Pretty sad. Where were we? Oh, they're calling them by name. Mike Baker was one of the first people on Twitter that I heard that was covering this case, and I cannot believe screw it. They need to be calling these assholes out by name. They really do need to be calling them out by name. That's wild. I love this right here, though. Investigation cleared him of any wrongdoing and described how he lost his job as a teaching assistant due to his failure to meet the norms of professional behavior in his interactions with the faculty, meaning that this part about him losing his job is a lie. That's pretty much like more proof. I mean, he was grading papers in Pennsylvania. We have proof that he was in Pennsylvania still grading papers. And he also never showed up with any cuts or bruises or scrapes or was limping or was sore in any way. He wasn't acting any different. He wasn't acting any different. I cannot wait to make a video shoving this shit in more people's faces. There's a reason why Forensic Frenzy took down every one of her freaking videos but one. She's been a liar this entire time. This is just so gross. This is just so gross. Okay. Mike Baker and Nicholas Boggle-Burroughs apparently are the ones who wrote this thing from the New York Times from February 10th of 2023, and they are getting called out. They're getting called out. If true, not saying it is true. These allegations can easily be explained by Mr. Kohberger's ASD. The allegations can be, but we also have an investigation that cleared him. So he didn't do shit. He didn't do shit. Given their difficulty interpreting social cues, people with ASD may misconstrue social niceties as romantic interest. And that's something else by Berryessa 2021. It is also no surprise that Mr. Kohberger came across as socially awkward or that he struggled to adapt to professional norms. These impairments are hallmarks of his disability, but he still didn't get fired. So they must have already known that he had Asperger's, and they couldn't find anything he actually did wrong. Because again, cleared. So he might have had issues. I actually know of another argument that was apparently happening between him and his professor, but it didn't have anything to do with school or anything personal between them. It had something to do with what I heard was that he didn't like the fact that there was LGBTQ flags literally every freaking where ever. And that they had gotten into him and a professor had gotten into an argument because he didn't feel like there needed to be a bunch of rainbow flags all over the place inside the classroom and on everything. And that was apparently an argument. Now that's coming from people at WSU. Again, it's just rumor from people that go to WSU that was the argument. But that came out and was talks for maybe a week or so and then sort of faded away. But that was really the only big argument. He doesn't have issues with it, with the lifestyle, but he didn't feel like it was necessary for it to be plastered everywhere in a house of learning. That's That's the rumor that circulated for a while straight from students at WSU. I just don't know how accurately true it is. I don't know how accurately true it is. Okay. Lack of facial expressions and abnormalities in eye contact and body language are so emblematic of ASD that they are explicitly listed in the diagnostic criteria for the disorder. But on the online commenters who have developed a cottage industry devoted to parsing Mr. Kohberger's every movement, these symptoms of his disability are sure signs of guilt. Ask JLR. He sure believes so. One video analyzing Mr. Kohberger's body language, which has received over 1 million views, infers guilt from his deadpan look and robot-like walk, positing that his facial expressions and body language prove he is a murderous incel. And this is from Live Now from Fox. You see why I call out these mainstream media freaks? You see why I do these reaction videos where I sit there and I listen to every word that they're trying to freaking spew out here and then feel the need to come out and debunk the bullshit? Look how many of them are listed in here. Come on, man. A similar video viewed over 350,000 times lambasts Mr. Kohberger for his glare and blank, empty stare, his cold iciness, his intense expression, and his lack of facial effect. From who? From who? Somebody who's supposed to be a reputable network. Law and Crime. No. No. Noting the rigidity of his posture, rigidity of his posture and his apparent lack of emotion, here comes the New York Post, described Mr. Kohberger as showing a level of calm most comparable to infamous assassin Lee Harvey Oswald. They said that? I didn't know they said that. Oh, that's wild. Damn, that's wild. A headline from the U.S. Sun says it all. Look of a killer. Idaho suspect Bryan Kohberger's psychopathic stare entering court hides chilling emotion, says body language expert. So freaking hilarious. And I love how they're calling out the authors. Call out Howard Bloom. Call him out. These widely viewed and highly prejudicial media reports, draped in the language of expertise and analysis, demonize Mr. Kohberger for his disability. In an environment so tainted by rampant and vitriolic conjecture, it is impossible for Mr. Kohberger to receive the individualized sentencing determination, including full and careful consideration of mitigation evidence that the Constitution demands whenever the state seeks to extinguish a human life. We're almost done. Holy crap, all 28 pages. The sustained national media attention on this case also repeatedly emphasizes that the alleged crime is brutal and shocking in nature. I don't disagree with that. I just don't think they got the right guy. These types of cases were of particular concern to the U.S. Supreme Court and underpinned the categorical approach in Adkins and Roper. Unacceptable. Ooh, that's like a whole Sally sells seashells down by the seashore type situation. An unacceptable likelihood exists that the brutality or cold-blooded nature of any particular crime would overpower mitigating arguments based on youth as a matter of course, even where the juvenile offender's objective immaturity, vulnerability, and lack of true depravity should require a sentence less severe than death. Likewise, I paused because I started thinking of a case in Texas that we talked about a long time ago that I probably should do another update on because it's really, really screwed up. Do you guys remember me talking about the 10-year-old that shot a guy in cold blood when he was 8? Do you guys remember me talking about that? I think I privated the video because I never did an update on it and I didn't want it just sitting there where it was, but I need to redo it. He was like 8 years old. You remember? Yeah, it was crazy shit. He was 8 years old and he saw a guy randomly walking across the RV park where he was staying at with his grandpa, like on some sort of like school vacation. It was like school break. He was hanging out with his grandpa at an RV park and he saw a guy that he'd never met before. The guy never touched him, never said hi to him, never even spoke to him. Okay. Something about this dude just like imprinted on this freaking 8-year-old's freaking head. Okay. He, in the middle of the night, gets up, goes into his grandpa's truck, takes the pew pew out of the dash, goes into this guy's RV because somehow he was able to sneak into this guy's RV at freaking 8 years old and pops one in the head. Okay. Puts the gun back in his grandpa's truck, goes back to sleep like nothing happened. 2 years later, he's in school and he's on a school bus threatening to kill a child. That's probably going to get this video flagged. I'm going to have to go back in and quiet it down. Oh, no. He did it. He went 2 years later and was on a school bus getting into an argument with a little girl. He's a boy getting into an argument with a little girl. And he tells her that he's going to he's going to her. And he knows how because he's done it and he's gotten away with it before. And that's where they pulled him aside, had the cops come in, and he admitted and told the entire freaking story out of his own face. And this was an unsolved situation for 2 years at that point. Can you imagine being the freaking parent, being the family, and hearing that the 2-year-old freaking homicide case of your child that got shot in their sleep turned out they were killed by an 8-year-old little kid in the middle of the freaking night? Can you freaking imagine? Can you freaking imagine? He was 8 years old, was able to keep it to himself for 2 years until he decided to threaten somebody else's life and boast about the fact that for 2 years he'd gotten away with it. That tells me right there that at 10 and 8 years old, he knew what he was doing was wrong, and he was gleeful at the fact that he was able to get away with it. Isn't that insane? Insane as shit. Evil can be born. Evil can be born. Happened here in Texas. And the guy had like just started a job. Like where he was staying was like an RV where he was just staying for a little while because he had just gotten hired on at a job, and he was in the area for a job. And this little kid, an 8-year-old, he was 8. He was 8. It's just insane. Kids do know right and wrong from a very young age. And the fact that he was like, I got away with it before, I'll do it again. We don't use chanclas enough anymore. Jeez. Just too much. Too freaking much. Too freaking much. All right, let's continue. Tangent. Let's continue. I think we're right here. Likewise, a jury in this case will be emotionally overwhelmed by the factual allegations and simultaneously look at a defendant who appears to be emotionally uninvested, and unmoved, and who cannot persuasively testify in his own defense. There is little doubt that the reality will overpower any mitigating arguments based on ASD as a matter of course, amounting to an unconstitutional risk that Mr. Kohberger, on account of his disability, will be unreliably convicted and sentenced to death. For all of the reasons set forth above, Mr. Kohberger's ASD prevents him from being sentenced to death in a manner that accords with the constitutional requirements of proportionality and reliability. Like juveniles and people with disabilities, he is insufficiently culpable to be sentenced to death. The aims of deterrence and retribution will not be satisfied by his execution, and he faces an unacceptable risk that the death penalty will be imposed in spite of factors which may call for a less severe penalty. As such, the death penalty must be struck as a possible penalty in this case. "28 pages. I wonder how these assholes feel about being called out. And like, I highly doubt any of them are going to end up coming out and being like, oh, that's our bad. We didn't mean to overanalyze him. Turns out he's autistic and we were wrong. I highly doubt that's ever going to happen, even with them being called out now. But it's like, did I grow up around Mexicans? Because I said something about chocolate? Honey, baby, I grew up in South Texas. South Texas. South Texas. It's just, oh, he found his damn flute. My sister thought she was being funny. My son's birthday is on the 25th of March. He's going to be 7. And she thought it was funny he didn't have like an instrument to play, but he kept like blowing this straw and making like notes with it. So she's like, "Oh, I bought him an early birthday present," and it showed up, and it was like a recorder flute. You know, the one where you play hot cross buns. She bought him a freaking flute, so I can hear it. Can y'all hear him playing? You can hear him. He loves Imagine Dragons. So he came in here the other day, and he was like, he can't play it. He doesn't know the freaking notes, right? Like he's just pretending, but he's like doing it to the beat of the Imagine Dragon song, thinking he's really playing it. I was like, "You go, boy." It was so funny. Oh yeah, I know all about the chunkless. I had a Mexican babysitter growing up, so I know, I know about the chunkless. I love dragons too. I like Imagine Dragons, but I love dragons. Actually, whenever I was growing up as a kid, I had like, I know y'all see my walls are painted different colors now. It's actually not even done. Like I've got stuff everywhere. Anyway, growing up, I had 2 blue walls and 2 purple walls, and my parents let me take paint markers. I used to hand draw. Like I used to be able to draw. I'm actually really good at like a lot of stuff. I'm just not like a super expert at like anything. That's why like Jinx of all trades is more appropriate and Master of None is like legit because I'm really, really good at lots and lots of stuff. Like I'm better than most people at almost everything I try. I'm not even trying to sound conceited. It's just true. I can cook without a recipe. I can just go in the kitchen, throw some shit together, and it's beautiful. And you'd want to pay $30,000 for the plate. Okay, I can do lots of things, but I'm not a master at anything. So I just kind of do everything, a little bit of everything. So I used to draw, and I had a dragon that I hand drew with paint markers that went around 3 walls. Like his tail was over here, his body went all the way that way, and then his head went over this way. I love dragons. I am an Aries. My birthday is on April 18th. No, but I had little gremlins looking over fences. Like I'd have little fence marks, and then I'd have little gremlin fingers and their big old ears sticking out. I wish I had pictures. I'm literally the master of nothing. I just know how to do a lot of things really good. I do a lot of things really good, but I can't be a master of literally anything. So yeah. Yeah. Your birthday is 4 days before me? That's freaking cool. I saw somebody said that their birthday was on the 9th. I don't remember where it was. Somebody asked me a question about PayPal. If you sent me something through PayPal, I definitely got it. I just don't know how to really see y'all's information. I did get a PayPal. I don't remember if it was from your name. If you sent one, I got it though. Pretty positive. Yours is 420. Mine is the 18th, and then my best friend that I grew up with forever, and then we realized later on in life that we were cousins. Hers is the very next day, the 19th. Does he? Well, thank you. Tell him I said thank you. Lots of April people in here. Lots of April people. And I do appreciate it. Thank you very, very much. Thank you very mucho. 4-4. 4-6. Lots of them. I'm gonna have to go back and look because we know that EMS apparently got called over, but they weren't allowed to go in, is what we were hearing, because the cops got there and were like, "Oh, I think we have a homicide." Yours is the 14th. That's cool. My sister's is on St. Patty's Day, but I'm the one with the green eyes. Yeah, I'm pretty feisty. I argue with a lot of people on Twitter. Tax day. Tax day. I still haven't even done my taxes. For the first time ever, I have to freaking pay money to the government, and I'm mad. So mad. I've never had to pay in taxes before. So now I'm aggravated. Trying not to. I'm trying to ignore it. St. Pat. Oh, it is. That's cool. You were in April. Oh, your name is April. You're not born in April. That's your anniversary. That's pretty cool. March 20th. That's just a few days before my son's. Summertime. Aries. It's actually really funny because me and my mother do not get along. For anybody who's been here for a while knows that I was raised in a Jehovah's Witness cult. And as I grew up, I just really realized a lot of things are not cute or okay. So, like, me and my mom don't get along. And she's a Scorpio, and I'm an Aries, right? She's the only Scorpio I don't get along with. Like, every other Scorpio that I've ever met, we are, like, instantly close and we bond. Oh, yeah, me and Tara argue all the time. But she's sometimes, like, the first one in here. I go live. We argue all the time. December 31st. My dad's is New Year's. Y'all are, like, right next to each other. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. You were conceived on Father's Day? Hey, that's a great way to be, honestly. What a great Father's Day present. Oh yeah. My grandma thinks that she's one of the 144,000 anointed. And it was not a good childhood. It was pretty screwed up. I actually posted about it in the I'm going to on my other channel. I have another channel. I just don't really ever do anything with it. I posted about it earlier today because I was watching Grey's Anatomy because I've never watched it, and so I'm like literally binging it. I don't know what season I'm on, but this episode today really triggered the shit out of me because it was about a kid who was 19 and he'd gotten into a skateboard accident, and his stupid ass parents were like, no blood transfusion, because Jehovah's Witnesses don't believe in any of that shit, and he died. And it just reminded me that whenever my daughter got sick, because most of you guys know that my daughter has HIV. I've talked about it 1,000 times on here. It's nothing new. For some of you, it might be new, but she's had it for almost 10 years now. And when she was sick and we were in the hospital and she had to do spinal taps and all these tests and stuff, she had to get a blood transfusion. And my mom sat there in the freaking hospital with me as the most hypocritical person on the planet when it came to actually practicing the religion, because like I wasn't allowed to do anything. I would literally get my ass beat 20,000 different ways from Sunday. If I brought home a birthday card or a Valentine's card, I had to sit in the library during Christmas parties, during the school plays, all the things. But I would see her bringing home birthday presents from her clients at the salon. She'd bring home stuff all the time. It's just a hypocritical existence. Okay. In the hospital, she was arguing with me about Ariel getting a freaking blood transfusion. So this episode of Grey's Anatomy like triggered me so hard. I was like, oh my, no. I was like yelling at the TV. Yeah. It was a whole thing. Yeah, it was a whole thing. She ended up getting the blood transfusion. I don't practice that crap. I never practiced it ever. Like I was forced into it. But it was just really triggering. So I was like, and then the kid died because he didn't get the blood transfusion. So I'm like, damn, like I can't even relax. Like that's what I was trying to do after the last live. I was like, I'm just gonna sit here. I'm gonna eat some food. And I made some, speaking of like Mexican stuff, I made some chorizo and egg quesadillas. Sat down and watched Grey's Anatomy, and I was like, but I've been wanting to talk about it. Because yeah, my grandma thinks that she's one of these like special godly appointed people. And people believe that. And I know how these people live and exist, so there's just no freaking way in hell. It was an interesting way to grow up. Oh, I'm sorry about your brother, little blue. Mm-hmm. Yeah, she acts like blood transfusions are so bad, but she does all the other stuff. Smokes cigarettes like a train, 2 in a row, drinks all the time, all the things. It's just so hypocritical. But yeah. I can believe that, Daniel. From what I've witnessed by, from certain people. But then again, like I said, I have some Scorpios in my life that are awesome people. Pretty awesome people. Jehovah's Witnesses. Jehovah's freaking Witnesses. It was a wild existence. But yeah, this document was interesting because we got a lot of more insight into what they're claiming that he's like behind closed doors. But then again, did we see these behaviors? Like, I'm really trying to see, like, I know that, like, we've all sort of assumed this with him, but, like, the rocking back and forth and stuff like that, like, I don't recall ever seeing any of that. I don't remember seeing any of that. I've watched people get disfellowshipped, and it was a sad thing. Like, I remember being really, really little and seeing this one woman have to always sit in the very back and watch the meetings, because they don't call it church, they call it a kingdom hall, and they don't call it a church service, they call it a meeting, and like sit in the back room, and if her husband or her kids talk to her during the meeting, then they would also be in trouble. They were only allowed to talk to her at home. Like, it's a really screwed up situation. Good night, Miller time. I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. Like, I feel like we've noticed like certain things, but I don't feel like it's as bad as they're trying to say, unless it's gotten bad since he's been in jail, which would make a lot of sense, because he's not out here like in the real world getting, I guess, all the accommodations or whatever that he normally would, and he's not really getting, I guess, what he really, really needs because he's in jail. So maybe it's gotten worse. It might have gotten worse. And maybe it wasn't so bad out in the real world, because we have the video of him getting pulled over in Pullman, and it's really not. I mean, it's definitely not something that I would be alarmed of. Definitely not that. He does. He looks very thin, very pale. His face looks very like. I'm hoping this is true. That she's also trying to expose the other 3 people that were there and involved. I really freaking hope so. Like, just the simple fact that we now have a document that says there was a main suspect. Who? No, I don't think he's normal. I think he does have a form of Asperger's. We can tell that by his behaviors. But I don't really know if this is like far as they're trying to say, especially with the argument of them being like, oh, he can't help his defense and blah, 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 blah. This is his profession. No. He was excluded as a contributor, and the state only admitted that evidence to the grand jury as exculpatory towards Bryan because it wasn't his. And that's literally in the document. Like, I'm not saying that to say that. It's in the document. We went over it earlier tonight. They really don't have a chance to convict without bias because it's already out there. And with all this stuff being out there, do you think that's the reason that they're... No, because I think they're only hiding it because they're actually putting it in evidence. And I think if they could, they would probably put the one from Washington in there for identifying the car and all the other boo-boo that they're claiming that they did it for. But it's Washington and not Idaho, so they probably just can't. So I don't know. I mean, no, but I just feel like certain things that we've heard, especially if the way that he overly was excited about seeing that one person that he'd only met that one time before at the party, if that guy's interpretation of the way that Bryan acted, seeing him again for the first time after the party, is accurate, then he probably does have a little bit of Asperger's. It doesn't, I mean, still, this whole like Asperger's thing doesn't bother me. Like, I always just figured he was like Sheldon Cooper. Like I said, I just always figured he was like Sheldon Cooper. So I don't know. But I like the fact that they're like calling out certain things and that they're proving right here that they did an investigation at WSU and he was cleared of anything. Well, and that's why I don't understand why they decided not to bring the other DNA to conclusion. Why would you not bring the other DNA to conclusion? How would you have a case like this and not bring the DNA to conclusion? I don't understand that. Well, why wouldn't you test it and get a name? Why wouldn't you send it off to do the same IgG work as you did on the knife sheath? It's blood. Actual blood. It's just a lot. It's just a lot. Okay, you guys. I'm going to go ahead and get off here. I'm going to go watch some more Grey's Anatomy and hopefully I don't get triggered anymore. I wasn't expecting that today. It really wouldn't. But we will go live again tomorrow, probably early afternoon at some point, go over some more documents. I'm going to go ahead and change the title for this one and the thumbnail in a little bit before I go to bed tonight to where it's only about like us shooting the shit for like an hour and then reading over the full autism document. And then we'll go over the rest. Not the rest of them tomorrow because there's a shit ton, but we'll go over more tomorrow. Twice. I'll go live in the afternoon. It might even be early morning, like 11 o'clock. That's not early, but it might be like 11 a.m., something like that. Just depends on what time I decide to do something. Just depends. But then I'll go again in the afternoon. Can you put the link to be a member? You are a member, Lady Hawk. You're green. Look. Oh, it doesn't show you on here, but you're green. You're a member. Okay. I'm going to go. Y'all have a great night. It is time change tonight. You right. Hopefully my phone just does its thing. And I don't have to worry about it. But then again, I ain't got no reason to be up hella early in the morning anyway. I'll just wake up whenever I wake up. But y'all have a great night. Y'all get some sleep. Okay, hold on. Let me put the link in then. Okay, so again, this is the one for Android phones. I don't know why YouTube is stupid and it makes you have two different kinds. But in case you have an Android, in case you have an iPhone, this is that one. Okay. Y'all have a great night. I'm going to go watch TV, relax, drink some chamomile and vanilla tea. Ooh, with some honey. So that hopefully I can sleep a little bit. Probably take a magnesium tablet. And zonk the frick out. Probably halfway through the episode. Y'all have a great night. I will see you guys tomorrow. Sleep well. Let me put my little thingy bobbers in here because I always forget to play them. And I run my mouth a lot, so I have to play this one.
Everything stated in this video is my opinion and my opinion only. And just like everything else in these cases we discuss here on this channel, everything is alleged.
And this one. Please do not forget to leave a like on your way out and subscribe to the channel if you are not subscribed already. Okay, you guys. See y'all.